Their version of consent is kind of like Bill Cosby's version of consent.
I have a question for you. And, I kind of mentioned this, the social scores, but you don't have to talk about that if you don't want to. What are the long-term implications of private companies controlling massive networks of this information?
Great question. And I don't mind at all talking about social scores. We actually have them already. It's just that most of them are not publicly seen. We all know that we have a credit score. If you want to go borrow money, the bank or the lender is going to look at what is your credit history? How much money do you make? How much money are you currently spending on fixed payments like a mortgage or a car payment? How much money do you owe on revolving debt like credit cards? There are proprietary algorithms from the big three, Experian, TransUnion, and drawing a blank on the third one right now. But there's three big credit scoring companies. Equifax, thank you. I remember that it began with an E, but I could not think what the third one was. But they have proprietary algorithms. They're going to give you a credit score, and that credit score is going to be used for determining what interest rate are you going to get, what's the maximum amount you can borrow, and whether you get the loan or not. That's the one that we all are familiar with because you can actually see your score. The scores that you can't see, insurance companies have scores for you, but they're not going to share that with you. And those scores are being driven by your driving habits. General Motors is being sued by the state of Texas right now. Attorney General Ken Paxton filed a lawsuit about a year ago against General Motors, claiming that GM was collecting data on about 15 million Texans and that GM was selling this information to insurance companies. And GM never denied collecting information or selling it. GM just said, but they consented to it. And let's talk about consent for just a minute, because that word has lost its meaning. I am a professor. I am required to go through IRB training. It's either every year or every other year. It seems like every year. But here's what IRB is. If you go back to the 1970s, late 1960s, early 1970s, you had the Milgram experiments going on. You had the Stanford Prison Experiment going on. There were people being psychologically messed up because of the trauma that they underwent in the name of science. The Stanford Prison Experiment is probably the best known, where college students were recruited. Some were assigned to be guards, some were assigned to be inmates, but the guards became very abusive, physically abusive of the inmates. And these are students turning on each other. But the whole point is, some of those students needed counseling when this experiment was over, and it only lasted a week. Congress intervened and they said no more experiments on human subjects unless you go through the institutional review board that they just created. And here's what's required. And when we say doing research on human subjects, I'm not talking about dissecting people. Research on human subjects means doing a survey. So if I wanted to do a survey for academic publication, I have to fill out a whole bunch of forms, give to my university's institutional review board, and they will review my methodology, and they have to give me a thumbs up and say you're approved before I go out and do my research. Failure to do so jeopardizes all federal funding to my university. They take this very, very serious. If I, as a professor, went out to do academic research and I bypassed the institutional review board, I would most likely be fired. So this is a very serious issue, but Congress defined what is informed consent because participants have to give their informed consent. And informed consent has 8 elements to it. This is in federal law. And I can't remember all 8 off the top of my head, but I have to tell them this is voluntary. I have to tell them that you're not going to be subject to any penalty if you decide midway through the experiment that you don't want to continue. But I have to tell them how I'm going to treat their data. Just because they filled out the survey and I collected their data, I can't just do anything I want with that data. The informed consent, I have to tell them up front, here's what I'm going to do with this data. Here's the analysis I'm going to do on it. Here's where it's going to be published. I will not do anything else with this data. And once I have explained all of this to a participant and they say, I'm okay with that, now I can do my research. That is what informed consent looks like. Now let's compare that to a privacy policy that you're going to find at Meta or Google or somewhere else. We respect your privacy goal. We may share your data with our business partners. Okay, let's break that one down. Nobody sells your data anymore. That's an outdated concept because selling data, most people are opposed to selling data. We do not sell your data, but we may share your data with our business partners. And who are your business partners? People that give us money. That sounds a lot like you're selling my data. Oh no, this is completely different. We're just sharing it with people that give us money. So anyway, my point is, when you read these privacy policies, number one, if you're not a lawyer, you probably have no idea what it means, even if you read the privacy policy. And these companies are claiming they have consent, but their version of consent looks nothing like what real consent looks like. I've jokingly said this before in a video. Their version of consent is kind of like Bill Cosby's version of consent. It's not real consent. So
good point.
That's what we have to be really careful of with these companies that are collecting our data. What is the long-term risk? Well, you're going to have companies that know you better than your best friend knows you, better than your spouse knows you, probably better than you know yourself, because they don't just know you, they know everybody. Gemini, Google's AI, just launched a brand new feature. This has been within the last day or two. That AI will train off of you, not your interactions with it. Most AIs train off of your interactions with them. But with Google Gemini, if you have one of the paid tiers for Google Gemini, you can give it access to your hard drive. It will go through every email that you have ever sent or received. It will go through your text messages. It will go through your photos. It will establish a baseline for you. The last 4 times that you took pictures where you were at a beach for 4 days in a row, you were probably on vacation. But it knows you have a fondness for Florida because you don't go to Texas beaches, you don't go to Georgia beaches, you always go to Florida when you go to the beach. But it knows what type of food do you like, because it can go through and analyze, here's the receipts that you're getting from places that you shop. But it's going through your hard drive. It knows you. And that's Google that's offering this service. They may say that this is going to be kept private. This will never be shared with anyone else. But let's look at that for just a second. Let's assume there is a company out there that is very privacy oriented. This is a company with a really good reputation for protecting people's personal data. If I give that company access to my hard drive so that it can search every photo, every email, every text, every personal note that I've written, and that company now has all of this information about me, what happens if that company gets bought by a bigger company? There goes my data. And it really doesn't matter how good a privacy protection that company had. As soon as they're bought, my data is now under the control of a bigger company. And so people really need to think carefully before they give access to any company to go in and look at their data like this. What I foresee in the very near future is these companies are going to know us as well or better than we know ourselves. And then once they do that, I've used the term before, strip mining people. I'm old enough to remember when companies had personnel departments. My first job out of college, I went to work for General Motors in 1988. And I clearly remember in 1988, there was a personnel department. Around 1990, 1991, that sign came down and the sign went up that this is now the Human Resources Department. What do you do with resources? You exploit them. If there's coal in the ground, you don't leave it in the ground, you exploit that resource. we're now human resources. And there's a lot of meaning to that term. We are resources. We're no longer people. People were governed by the personnel department. Resources are managed by the human resources department.